Hi everyone and welcome to Protocol 36, and in today's video we'll be talking about if Insomniac will add any more non-Spider-Man villains in Marvel Spider-Man 2. Before we get started, if at any point you enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate if you could drop a like, as that would really help out the channel. Thank you. Now, as we know in the comics, Peter Parker has faced many different types of villains, a lot of them outside of his own rogues gallery. And in Spider-Man PS4 we did get Taskmaster, who as we all know isn't exclusively a Spider-Man villain. So in this video we'll be answering the question of whether or not Insomniac will add more this time for the sequel, and I believe there's a very good chance that they will. So let's look at the different types of villains that we could see in the game. Now, there's a villain I can see who I mentioned before, Taskmaster, make a return for the sequel, especially since he escaped after we defeated him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back to defeat Spider-Man with the moves he's already memorized from the last game, and possibly even more. Heck, he could even memorize other moves from the Avengers and possibly even use it against us. And if he does eventually return in the sequel, we could learn more about who he was working for, which might be an organization that is well funded, which personally I would love to learn more about. We could also have a Daredevil villain who's called Mr. Fear, who pretty much has similar types of abilities as DC's Scarecrow, where he's also shown to use fear toxin against his enemies. The reason why I say Mr. Fear, even though he's not really that much of a popular villain, is because in one of the leaks which I've covered, if you don't know what I'm talking about, a link will be in the card in the right hand corner of the video, where it mentions that there's going to be a third playable character who uses gas particles and ropes, and I speculated that that could be Yuri Watanabe as Wraith, and like the comics, she could have gotten her equipment from Mr. Fear. And assuming that this is true, there's a very good chance that we could see Mr. Fear himself, assuming that Yuri didn't kill him. So according to the leak, there's a good chance for him to show up. Personally, I think he's more likely going to have an Easter egg and more of a direct reference than a cameo, but it would be cool to acknowledge him and basically indicate that Daredevil has been around and did make a few enemies. As we know, Daredevil does exist in this universe, and Peter Parker and Matt Murdock have met, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do get mentions or even cameos from other Daredevil villains. And speaking of Daredevil villains, we have Stiltman. Stiltman is another character who has fought Spider-Man multiple times in the comics, and even though he isn't much of a popular character, he could provide an interesting boss fight and variety in terms of gameplay in the sequel. But I think the chance of seeing him is very unlikely, especially when there are more popular characters for them to choose from. But an extremely popular character I can definitely see showing up in the game is Juggernaut. Juggernaut has fought Spider-Man many times in the comics, and even appeared in a Spider-Man game in the past, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. And obviously with Marvel now having the rights to the Fox characters like the X-Men and Fantastic Four, I can definitely see someone like Juggernaut make an appearance in this game, and then Insomniac can definitely use him to show us players how powerful Peter Parker is in the black suit compared to how he was before, with him sometimes struggling with the Rhino. So with Juggernaut being an extremely popular Marvel villain and having fought Spider-Man so many times in the comics, I definitely think he has a chance of being in the game. Now, the next one isn't really a Spider-Man villain. Heck, it's not really a villain, but we have the Punisher. Now, with the Punisher's first appearance, he did go after Spider-Man to kill him after he was wanted for the apparent murder of Norman Osborn. Maybe in the Insomniac Marvel universe, he saw some of the violent actions of the brand new black suited Spider-Man, which may have scared a lot of innocent civilians. And Frank Castle might see this as Spider-Man potentially going bad, therefore eliminating him before he becomes a problem in the future. Or possibly another catastrophe happens in New York, similar to Devil's Breath in Spider-Man PS4, and Spider-Man gets blamed for it again, which may cause the Punisher to say enough is enough and decides to take him down. I really like the idea of the Punisher being in a Spider-Man game as a boss. I think that would be sick, and I wouldn't be surprised if Insomniac does use him in the sequel. Though if he were to show up, I think he would probably appear in the side mission rather than a main mission. But I do believe in the Heist DLC there was a reference to the Punisher, specifically a reference to the Costa family, who were responsible for the deaths of Frank Castle's wife and children. So there's a very good chance that he might actually exist in this universe, and I definitely wouldn't be surprised, since it already seems like there are different types of characters who already exist in this world, for example the Avengers, Daredevil, and etc. So I wouldn't be surprised if Frank Castle is out there killing criminals in Insomniac's Marvel universe. And for the next character who might or might not appear is Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom, as we know, is Marvel's most infamous villains out there and has fought Peter Parker in the past. Now, even though he has regularly faced Spider-Man, I think it's very unlikely that Dr. Doom will show up in this game. Maybe a reference or even a name drop, even better, but definitely not an appearance. I know that Matt Pat from Game Theory has mentioned that Dr. Doom might be the main villain in Marvel Spider-Man 2, but I'm gonna respectfully disagree and say that Dr. Doom most likely won't show up in this game. But if he does, obviously that would be awesome, but I don't think it would make much sense for him to show up. I can't see two villains who aren't from Spider-Man's rogues gallery appear in this game, because it would be nice to have have more than one, but also not too much, since after all it is a Spider-Man game and it's only fair to include other villains who didn't make it to the first game. So if I had to choose, I'll probably go with Juggernaut and the Punisher. The Punisher isn't really a villain, but he would be a great antagonist for this version of Peter Parker. As we know, Peter Parker has fought them several times in the comics, especially the Juggernaut, and I think he does have a very good chance of showing up, like I mentioned before, and cause a lot of trouble for our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, while also at the same time expanding Insomniac's Marvel universe further. Possibly even have more references to the X-Men, kind of like we got in Spider-Man Miles Morales, but this time we'd be going up against one of the strongest X-Men villains, and maybe even hopefully one of Marvel's most popular and dangerous anti-heroes. However, what about you guys? Do you think we could get more non-Spider-Man villains in Marvel Spider-Man 2? If so, if not, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, please like, and want more, subscribe. To begin, Protocol 36.